Okay, we're live. All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out tonight for our reopening town hall for staff. I'm Tom Flanagan, the new superintendent in Burlington. Although I don't feel like a new superintendent anymore. That was week one. But I'm very excited to be here tonight to have this really important conversation with you all. It's not the way that I anticipated or ever thought that I would be spending my first engagement with you as a staff. And so, but it's such a pressing topic that we really need to hit the ground running and make sure that we're prepared for the beginning of school. And so this is obviously the top of mind for everybody. I do want everyone to know that because we're broadcasting to a large group tonight, and it is a little impersonal in some ways because of the circumstance. I am going to be coming out to each school, coming out virtually to each school to meet with staff at each school before the school year starts, so we can have a more intimate and a conversation that where there was back and forth and in person. But tonight we're really excited to hear from you. The real purpose of tonight is to hear what your thoughts are. And I wanted to just start before I even really get started, and make sure that I clarify a couple things that were out there in the news, and that is that we really have not made a decision on the model that we are going to be employing in August. However, we are hearing your feedback, and I think we're really close to knowing which direction we're going to go. And I think that we are going to be seriously considering a hybrid model, not the what you may have seen in a recent article. So I just wanted to clarify that up front so that maybe that helps as you're asking questions before we get to the slide where I talk about that. I also want to say that, I spent the last few months on a listening and learning tour. I had the opportunity to speak with about over 60 people who are in Burlington and in the Burlington School District. And what I heard from people who I spoke with to the person was that when I asked the strengths of the district, they said the people. They said the teachers, paraprofessionals, all staff, right? Our educators are the strength of the district. And I've seen that. I've been to summer school sites at Hunt and Flynn and BHS, and I've seen just amazing interactions between students and teachers already in challenging circumstances. And so I see that strength in our district, and you as our strength in the district. And as a former teacher myself, and I consider myself an educator now, I want us to work together. And so I'm going to be working hard to build relationships with you, to be in your schools, in your classrooms, to be available to you for support. And I also want to make sure you know that I see the role of central office as one of support for schools. Our job is primarily to make sure that you have the support and the resources that you need to be successful with our students. And that's our job. That's my job. And that's going to be the job of the central office in Burlington. I also want to say I've had so far really, really positive interactions and relationships and collaboration with our union partners. That's really important to me that we are working together. So I've been working closely with Dwight Brown, the chair, our AFSCME chair, and Andrew Stiles, our BEA president. And we're not always, they push me. I don't want you to think we're talking and we're all just, everything's, perfect in the sense that we all agree on everything immediately. But what we do is we collaborate, and Dwight and Andrew have pushed us in positive directions around the way we're thinking about reopening, around the way we're thinking about how we collaborate together. And to me, there's no other way to do this work but to do it together. And so I really want to thank them for welcoming me, for pushing us, and for being collaborators and being a part of the team. My big theme is team. We are a team of educators in schools and in central office, and we have to be a team together. There cannot be a divide. We have to work together for the best interest of our students and our community. So with that, I want to introduce Andrew Stiles and Dwight Brown to give an introduction as well. Andrew, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Andrew Stiles. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Edmonds Elementary School and president of the Burlington Education Association, which represents the nurses, paraeducators, and teaching staff of the district. I'm really pleased to see the amount of work and thought that is being put into this process, and it has been a mind-boggling amount of work that's been going on, and I'm just really pleased to see some specific things coming out that are going to really look at safety for students and staff and community as we move into this what will be another difficult school year.
Thank you, Andrew.
Hello, my name is Dwight Brown. I'm an IT specialist with the Burlington School District. I'm entering my 17th year, I believe. I represent ASME 1343, Local 1343, and the contracts we cover are property services, which include our custodial staff, our grounds people, our trades people. We also represent our bus drivers, our food service personnel, yay. And we also represent our IT staff. And I want to welcome our superintendent here. His willingness to reach out to us and collaborate with us is just been a welcoming thing, and his communication skills is just outstanding. I just want to say that the people that I represent are our district's essential workers, and I want to highlight the job they did during the shutdown and the work they did, risking their own lives and taking that disease back to their families. And all of them performed well, and they're ready to perform now. I talked to them, and they're in this with us, and they want to do what's best for our students and our staff, with the understanding that, you know, outcomes for our staff if they get this is a lot worse. But I want to assure them that I'm glad we're having this, and there's a lot of things that's been going on. There's numerous people working on this. Some of them are not on this call tonight, but they're a part of the reopening team, and we're going to do what we have to do to make sure this is done right and done safely.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. So, Mr. Prusak, could you give us an update on how we're going to run the show tonight, please?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I wish I could see everyone's faces. Hopefully we'll get to do that soon. I'm Victor Prusak. I am the coordinator of engagement for the school district. Some of you may have seen that in an announcement from Tom a few weeks ago in an email. I've been in the district. This is my 13th year. I was the coordinator of magnet schools, assistant director of curriculum, achievement gap lead, and now that the role has evolved a little bit. Thanks for coming to our staff town hall meeting. Thanks to everyone who took the time to fill out the staff reopening survey. Tonight, we're going to be talking about our best thinking and planning around reopening schools. After the presentation, we're going to open it up to you. We want to know what your questions and concerns are. For the question and answer portion of the meeting, please use the chat function at the bottom of your screen to type in your questions. Please do not use the Q&A function, as we will not be checking that. We are checking the chat on both YouTube and on Zoom. We have a team of people monitoring these questions, but we may not be able to get to every single one tonight. However, we want to make sure no question goes unanswered. Therefore, all questions will be copied from the chat and entered into an FAQ or otherwise responded to. If after this session you still have questions, feel free to email these questions to the Reopening Task Force email. It'll appear on a bunch of slides as well, but it's BSD reopening at bsdbt.org. It's more efficient if we send those questions there as opposed to different folks who we know in the district. You can always CC other people. After tonight's town hall, we'll post these slides and an FAQ to our reopening task force page on the district website. It will also include the FAQs from last night's family town hall meeting. So thank you again for joining. Please welcome BSD Superintendent Tom Flanagan.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor. So the purpose for tonight is really just to explain our process and explain where we are in the process. So everyone really has a clear understanding of the timeline and what we've been doing up to this point and where we are now and where we're planning to go. We're going to describe the family reopening school surveys. That's actually the family and staff. We're going to focus on the staff reopening school surveys and those results, and talk about how they'll inform our decisions. And the real purpose of tonight for us is to hear your feedback. We want to hear your questions. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to hear your suggestions to inform us, because we are in the closing stages of making a solid recommendation on how we'll move forward in the fall. So we look forward to hearing from you in the ways that Victor mentioned. And the way we're framing our planning around this is in 3 ways. So I put out a 100-day plan at the beginning of my time here, July 1st, and it's focused around 3 areas. And those areas are in equity, engagement, and deep learning. So the work that we are doing is focused in those areas as we think about reopening. With that, we have a panel here today. So there's been a task force that's been working on this at the district office since May. There are a lot of detailed plans on how we will ensure that school happens this fall. And we still have some big decisions to make about exactly what that will look like. And so we're getting really close to being able to make those decisions. Some of the people who are on that task force are on the call tonight to help answer questions. So I'd like for us to go around and introduce, for the panelists to introduce themselves. And I can't see you all, panelists, so just jump on in.
Hi, I'm Stephanie Phillips. I'm the Executive Director of Teaching and Learning. Good evening, BSD staff. Thank you for being here tonight. We really do appreciate the feedback that you've provided to us up through the surveys, and we look forward to hearing more from you this evening.
Good evening, everybody. This is Marty Spalding. I'm the Director of Property Services for the school district. I hope many of you are enjoying this break. I know it was a challenging end of the year for everybody to work through the remote learning process. So hopefully everybody's enjoying a much needed break right now.
I'm Joe Restighini. I am the principal at Champlain Elementary School, K-5 school in the south end of Burlington. Again, I just want to reiterate that message that we're hopeful that we can get back on the rails for the beginning of the school year. And I want to applaud and thank everyone for all of their hard work when we went to closure and throughout the summer, the concentrated efforts that you're all doing to help prepare for student social emotional well-being to get back into the school building soon. So thank you, and thank you for joining us tonight.
Ms. Anderson-Brown, you're muted. I see you talking.
I had to warm up. So anyways, I'm Z Anderson-Brown. Sorry about that. I'm your Director of Human Resources. I don't work in IT, obviously. And I just want to thank everybody for coming out tonight to listen to the message. This has been a group lift. And we just want to thank everybody for their flexibility and everyone on staff who've been doing little and big steps to help support us to get ready to go back to school in a few weeks.
Hi everyone, I'm Nathan Lavery. I'm the Director of Finance and Operations, and I'm also leading the reopening task force.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christy Galise, and I'm the Director of Expanded Learning Opportunities, that is after school and summer programs. And I have the privilege of working with an amazing group of people to run the summer programs and the essential worker childcare and after school.
Hi, everyone. This is Noel Green, principal of Burlington High School. Welcome to our town hall meeting. We are really excited to hear from you as we've done a lot of work so far as we prepare for the upcoming school year. And I'm excited about this dialogue. Thank you.
Do we have Miss McCrae on? There you go.
Hi, everybody. I'm Becca McCrae. I'm the school nurse at Edmonds Middle School, and I am also the district COVID coordinator that was outlined in the guidelines.
Hi, everyone. My name is Avalon Stiles Ashley. I am the interim communications specialist for the district, filling in for Russ Ellick, who is back this week. And Victor Pruzak and I will be monitoring all of your questions.
Okay. Okay, so for reopening, thank you, everybody, and thank you for the hard work that you all have done to get started on this planning and to get us to where we are today, which is very far along and ready to go, almost ready to go for the schools to start. So our commitment to Burlington is that we are going to use the state and federal guidelines for reopening. So the Agency of Education has guidelines that we are following, and they have us starting in step 2 of those guidelines. And so we are going to be following their guidelines and watching those guidelines carefully. We're also going to be consulting health professionals, families, and staff in our decisions, which we're doing now. We've been lucky to have Ms. McCrae on our task force to help us, as she's been deeply involved in the work around the state. And I just want to, and we're going to prioritize student and staff health and safety. We also want to make sure that students have deep, rigorous learning experiences. We want to make sure that learning is real and is really happening for them. And I know that's something that you all want, and it's something that we want to work together to ensure that we can do that. And we also know that we're going to need to build social emotional supports. We know that students have been away, and we're going to need to be really conscious about how we bring them back and intentional about how we rebuild relationships and rebuild connections. And we're also going to ensure and prioritize specialized services for English learners and for students with disabilities. And I also want to say that we are, as we're looking at local guidance, it's really important as we think about coming back to school with some in-person instruction, it's important to look at the local health data in Vermont. And particularly in our area in Chittenden County recently. So we are in a good place and in many ways have suppressed the disease here. And so the caution is that a lot of people are following the national news where the disease is very different than it is here. And so the local health guidance is that we are able to open with some form of in-person instruction. And so that is what we're planning for. So in terms of how we've planned, again, we formed a task force back in May. The task force has work groups that pull off and work together on specific areas. We come back regularly. Those groups have really built out their areas around transportation, food services, health and safety. And now we're pulling together to think about what those look like as we all come together as we decide on the final model. We're doing these town halls. We believe in engagement. Engagement is really important to us. And so we're consciously engaging and making sure that we're providing interpretation services and translation services in our written communication so that we get everyone's feedback. That's very important to us. And then we are planning to make a final decision by August 4th. I think we will have a decision before August 4th, but that's our end goal. And then to be ready to implement on August 26th. So August 26th, that date could move a day or two to give a little bit more time for planning, but that's a possibility at this point. And I wanted to also mention that I've been working with the regional superintendents who are coming together around a regional decision for how we reopen. And so some of those calendar decisions also depend on the regional decision, but it's been really good working with the regional superintendents who are on a similar page around how we want to reopen across the region. So in terms of teaching and learning, we really need to be serious about student learning and their progress. This is an equity imperative, particularly for students who have been historically marginalized, students who need us the most. We need to make sure we're there for them and that their learning is meaningful and deep and rigorous. And I know that you all want that. I've been in classrooms at Flynn and Hunt, and I've seen really committed educators working hard with students each and every day. And so I know that's what we want collectively as a community. We also are going to assess student learning, and we're going to build plans for every student. We're going to be doing some remote and in-person learning. We know that, and we're also going to need to build a continuum for if we're doing better and we can go to school more often in person, or if we need to step back. And social emotional learning is going to be, and restorative practices are going to be a foundation for how we work together. Because I've heard from you that's something you want to continue, and so I want to make sure that's a part of what we're going to do.
I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's a request that with the translation that multilingual liaisons are doing, if we could slow it down a little bit.
Yes, sorry.
Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to, at this point, pass it off to our Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Stephanie Phillips.
Thank you. So I want to highlight some of the work that we've started to do this summer and pieces that we will be implementing as we look to start the school year that come directly from the feedback that we received from teachers. So one of the things that we heard in the spring when we were forced to go into maintenance of learning and then continuity of learning was around devices. And so we took the feedback from teachers that said, you know, we really think our pre-K through grade 2 students would be better off with iPads, and our 3 through 5 students in grades 3 and up using a Chromebook environment. And so we took some time to do some research, to take your feedback, to look at what was developmentally appropriate. And we have moved forward with ordering both iPads and Chromebooks. So we'll be able to match what teachers said they felt they needed for the age level of children that they're teaching. We also heard about access to resources. And so there's a couple of different web pages that are being developed this summer to support certainly teachers, but also students and families. So the first one I want to just quickly mention to you is one that will be available on our internal staff portal. And what we heard from teachers when we went into the remote learning environment was that they really wanted to have resources in a place that was really easy to find. Just be able to go to one location, one folder, and really get the information that they needed. So we are in the process of building a website that will put certain teaching materials in an easily accessible place for staff. So we'll be able to have our assessments there, our PLC documentation, things that teachers are looking for. And they felt that when we went into remote learning, it was really difficult to navigate through all of the Google folders. We also heard from families that they wanted to have resources more accessible to them as well, more of a front page presence, if you will, on the website, rather than having to navigate many layers. So one of the things that we're preparing is a page that will give students and families access to district level resources, as well as some very easy to navigate links to school resources. As part of that, we are including information for families about how to access technology. So if a student is working from home, the parents will have resources that can help them in supporting their children. So resources for accessing things like our learning platforms. So a Seesaw, a Google Classroom, even a unified classroom system, but also databases and other subscriptions that we have access to. So really giving students and families the support that they need to access our resources when they're at home. So again, 2 different layers to our website presence, but again, based on feedback that we got from staff and families on ways that we can communicate better and be more supportive. We also, as part of the work toward reentry, we've had a district level reopening team. And from that district level reopening team, we've also had subgroups. And I think it's important to acknowledge that there are teacher representatives and staff representatives in those groups. And we will continue to do that work to make sure that all staff are represented as we continue to work and look forward to preparing for school to open at the end of August.
Stephanie, I'm sorry to interrupt. We're getting more requests for us to go more slowly.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
From a teaching and learning perspective, we will be asking teachers at all levels to form committees and to partner with our administrators to look at how we set up our systems to deliver curriculum and instruction.
Thank you, Ms. Phillips. We're going to move on to Mr. Spalding.
Thank you, Tom. So
Yes, sir.
I'm going to touch on the food service piece on behalf of our food service director, Doug Davis. So I want to repeat Dwight's comments about and put a big plug in for our food service staff who continued providing meals through the entire shutdown. They're also continuing to provide those meals throughout the summer, as well as to all of our summer school staff. So they've been working really hard through this whole process. So kudos go out to all of them. So what we do know in regards to food service with the reopening is that students will not be allowed to eat in the cafeteria. So food will be delivered to each classroom and they'll have to eat in the classroom. So they'll also be making sure that we're providing meals at breakfast time, lunchtime, and at the end of the day when students leave, they'll have the option to also bring a supper meal home with them. If in the event we go to kind of a A-B option, food will also be made available to those students on those off days as well. And obviously the food service staff are going to work within the state and federal, and as well as CDC guidelines in all the practices that they perform in their responsibilities. So going into facilities, I also want to put a big plug out there for all of my facility staff, both custodians and trade staff, working diligently through the summer, through their normal summer cleaning process that they go through to deep clean the schools and get them ready for all the staff and students to return in the fall. So some of the things that we're working around on preparing the facilities for the start of school are, I've been working with Becca McCrae, our COVID coordinator, on identifying where we'd have our screening areas. And Becca's going to go into that in a little bit more, that process a little bit more detail later. We're looking at how to physically distance students throughout the building with things such as plexiglass barriers, circulation designations that indicate students to travel in a certain direction. We're establishing hand washing procedures. Clearly, we know that we need to have sanitizer available at every entrance where students are being dropped off, and in every classroom. We're going to make that available for all of our students and staff. A big piece that we're doing in our facilities is looking at our ventilation. So some of the guidance is requiring that we increase those airflows in all the building, and how most ventilation systems are designed to conserve energy is that those ventilation systems reduce the amount of airflow when we have less occupants in it. This is what we call an occupied mode versus an unoccupied mode. So the guidance that we're seeing is to keep those ventilation systems running 24/7. So even when occupants aren't in the building, it's helping clear the air out of throughout all of the spaces. Our legislation recognized that many schools have very deficient ventilation systems in Vermont. So they actually just awarded $6.5 million to get put towards upgrades to ventilation systems in all schools in Vermont. So we are taking advantage of that grant being administered through Efficiency Vermont and looking at also improving some additional ventilation in many of our buildings through that grant as well. So we're also going to increase cleaning procedures, and all staff will be trained in proper cleaning and disinfecting.
Thank you, Mr. Spalding. So now we're going to hear from Becca McCrae. Ms. McCrae is going to talk to us about health and safety.
Hi, everyone. In addition to being the school nurse at Edmonds Middle School, I'm also the president-elect of the Vermont State School Nurses Association. And in my work as that position, I have been working very closely with Dr. Brina Holmes. She's the director of maternal and child health at the Vermont Department of Health. And we've been in close contact throughout the spring, working with school nurses statewide, as well as working on the guidelines together, drafting them and editing them over and over to come up with a final document that the governor finally approved and the AOE has set out. Based on all of our conversations and the continued conversations statewide, I really do believe that we are in a good place to start some sort of in-person learning, and that it will be safe and healthy if we all work together. I'm trying to slow down for the interpreters. So working under the guidelines as a district task force, we are doing our very best to make decisions based on health and safety and making sure that everyone that comes into our building is as healthy as they can be. So the first place we can start is by giving you guys a few tasks to help ensure your own safety and health. So we really need you to complete the mandatory VOSHA training and review the district's COVID safety plan that is on our district website under the Human Resources page. There are some people that have not completed the mandatory VOSHA training. This is not an ask, it's a need. You have to do this in order to come back to work. If you or an immediate family member who lives with you or another member of your household have any underlying health conditions placing them at risk for COVID-19, you need to contact Human Resources and Erin Dye in particular. And the reason behind this is that Human Resources has specific paperwork that needs to be filled out by your primary care provider. All employees, whether you're at risk or not, should consider contacting their primary care provider and having a wellness check with them to, one, establish a medical home, and two, to have a baseline of health so that if you do get sick, your provider knows what you look like when you're healthy. The most important piece of this whole thing is that if you are sick, if you have a fever of 100.4, or if you have any of the COVID-like symptoms, you need to stay at home. Do not come to work. This does not necessarily mean you have to take a sick day. If you have a common cold or mild symptoms and you're feeling okay, you could probably work from home remotely. But in order for our whole community to stay healthy, it's imperative that people stay at home when they have any sickness, including things like migraines or common cold symptoms. So that's really important. Please do not come to work if you are sick. Under the guidelines, we're doing a lot of different things to ensure health and safety. We are doing a temperature screening and daily health check of all students coming into the building. You as staff will also do a daily screening prior to coming to work. You will do this at home. There's a cloth facial covering for every single person that is required of us by the state for students and staff. We will be having frequent hand washing, and I know that there's been some concerns that we do not have hot water in all of the buildings, but science shows us that it's not the temperature of the water that is effective, it is the soap and friction of rubbing your hands together for at least 30 seconds and then rinsing that soap off that makes things clean. We also will be cleaning rooms regularly, and we will be cleaning shared materials between pods or between students. We'll also be making sure that each individual student has their own set of materials in certain cases. And we will be following Department of Health protocols if any cases of COVID-19 are confirmed in any of our school buildings. We're also making sure that no visitors or volunteers or outside people come into our building that do not have to be there to learn or work. In order to keep us safe, we are going to be following a pod system where we are going to keep classes together to include the same small group of students and teachers that remain together each day as we can. We're also going to space seating in the classroom to allow for social distancing and require that students stay in assigned sections of the schoolyard. So like when we have recess, we will be assigning each pod to a place on the playground that they can be or a specific time. And then we'll also be holding virtual meetings with students, families, and staff to limit in-person contact with people who are not part of your pod. So additional things are, a lot of people have asked the question, if we're in the same pod, are we going to be stuck in the classroom together all day? And the answer to that is no. You can move about. We can have outdoor classroom space. We can move around the building in terms of using the library or the cafeteria or the gymnasiums as areas that pods can take breaks from their classroom. But we do want to minimize travel from one building to another building. And also we want to make sure that we have the furniture in such a way that we are not inviting students or faculty to be in a common area together and socializing. That is something we do want to mitigate. So I just want to reiterate that in order for all of this to work, I'm very confident and optimistic that we can work together to make this a safe and healthy experience for people. But it's going to really rely on us working together as a whole community and ensuring that people are doing the right things for everyone, not just for themselves. And that is really important in terms of staying home when you're sick. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions at the end.
Yeah, thank you, Stephanie. And we'll definitely, I'm sure there'll be questions for you at the end, but it's been great having you as a part of our team. And you've helped us significantly to make decisions that are informed. So we appreciate you. Now we're going to hear from Executive Director Stephanie Phillips again about the school reopening survey. So she's going to walk through the staff responses in the school reopening survey.
So with the staff reopening survey, we asked several questions. Some of those required responses in a more narrative format. And we have taken those responses and have analyzed those and are using those in our weekly group meetings. So tonight, the slides that I'm going to focus on provide us with some data, both about how staff feel returning to work in person. And then we asked you to respond to a couple of different models related to reentry with students. So first, our question that looks at returning to work. And we asked staff to let us know how they feel about returning to school in person with additional safety and health measures in place. And you've heard from my colleagues tonight about some of those safety and health precautions that are being put in place. So we have asked you how you feel about coming back. We had 532 staff respond to our survey. So we were very pleased, and thank you for the time that all of you took to respond to the survey. This was a great turnout to a staff survey, and we appreciate your feedback and letting us know your thoughts about reentry in person. So you'll see on the chart, we had 5 categories, and that was true for all of the survey questions of this style. So we have taken the favor strongly and the favor somewhat categories to highlight in our results as we talk about the different survey questions this evening. So 60.48% of BSD staff are in favor of returning to school in person. So we're using that information as part of our planning process. And I'm going to now talk to you about specifically what we learned from your feedback related to the reopening models that we proposed. So the first reopening model that we asked staff to think about was what we call the Schedule 1 AM/PM model. So in this model, we would have a group of students come to school in the morning. Then we would have a transition period. Those students would go home roughly at midday. And a second group of students would come for learning in the afternoon, so that we could have 2 different groups of students in the building in a given day with time in between allowing for transition. So overall, you see the results for BSD staff. Favored strongly was 17%. Favored somewhat was 24%. We had 22.5% not sure, 22.5% opposed somewhat, and 14% opposed strongly. So that gave us some baseline information for the district overall. And then as you can see on the charts, we've broken that down for you, again, thinking about staff at the various levels. So starting with our early education staff and then our elementary staff, we're going to scroll to a slide that will show you the response rates that we had from middle school and high school as well, looking at this AM and PM schedule. So here are the middle school and high school results as it relates to implementing that Schedule 1 approach of AM and PM. So just to recap the results for this particular schedule option, there was just over 37% in the early education staff, about 44.4% in the elementary staff, 48.9 for middle school, and 33.9 for high school staff that supported returning to school using the AM/PM model. So the next option that we asked staff to give us feedback on was the schedule to the alternating days. So overall, BSD staff, 18% favored strongly, 42.6% favored somewhat, 20% not sure, 11.7% opposed somewhat, and 7% opposed strongly. Similar format as to the Schedule 1 slide. We took the overall information that we had on staff responses and broke this down again. Primary school staff being our preschool staff, elementary school staff, middle school, and high school. So the way that those results come out for us indicate that staff at each of these levels overall preferred the alternating day schedule. So we had 66.6% of our early ed staff, 57.2% of the respondents from elementary. We had 65.9% for middle school and 68.1% for high school staff. So overall, again, Schedule 2, the alternating days, had a more favorable response than option number 1, the AM/PM schedule.
Thank you, Stephanie. So based on the survey, again, we had a good level of feedback. Thank you all for taking the survey and for giving us your feedback and your thoughts about this. It does seem that most of us, both families and staff, do want to return to school, which is a common theme that I am hearing in summer school and sort of out on the street as people are talking about school. We know there's some fear and some anxiety, and I think that's normal. What we've seen, I think some of the instructive places to look at, like Denmark and Finland, sometimes there was this fear going in, and then as students came back, they got into routines and rhythms, and they saw that it could happen, and it was happening. So I think we have to sort of trust the process, trust the health data, trust the health professionals, and be prepared to open in the fall. So our current recommendation is definitely whatever we decide, we're going to meet or exceed the current health guidelines. And those are reflected in the Agency of Education guidelines that we're following, because the Department of Health and the Agency of Education are collaborating closely. And we just got additional guidance yesterday from the Agency of Education on hybrid learning, which defined for us the possibility of hybrid learning in a way that we hadn't had before, and we weren't sure that we had the ability to utilize. And so what we've learned is that we can implement a hybrid model where some students are in school and some students are learning from home, and they can flip-flop. So based on what the feedback is that we've received from staff and from students, the strong favorite is the alternating day schedule for K-12. So what that would look like is an A and B day schedule. So students would go, we still would have to make a decision about the days, and we still have to finalize this decision. The decision isn't final tonight. It's about giving you our best thinking about where we are, but we are pretty far along in our thinking, and the additional guidance from the Agency of Education and the regional superintendents is helpful for us. So we are currently planning for an alternating day schedule, K-12. And depending on the final decision about the model, we may need to stagger arrival and dismissal and look at arrival and dismissal times. So that's where we are right now. We want to now open it up for questions, and we took longer than we planned. So we're going to extend the time until 8:30 for questions. And again, we will respond to questions online via email and in an FAQ afterwards. So the first two questions are questions that we received before we even got here. And so that the first one, we are going to ask Mr. Brown. Dwight Brown's going to ask this question.
Well, a lot of feedback that I've gotten is staff wanting to answer this question about what is being done in the physical spaces in our building, such as evaluating desks versus tables, evaluating space requirements for the number of people in the room, and noting the amount of people in the room that we can provide proper physical spacing. And that's been a big one for a lot of staff. And I was wondering if Mr. Spalding, I know you've done a lot of work around these issues, can respond to that.
Good question, Dwight. So first I'll talk about the makeup of our task force and our subgroups. So we have our reopening task force. Part of that task force are a number of subgroups. My subgroup is the transportation and facilities group. The members on my subgroup are, I have Smith Principal Len Smith, who is representing the elementary school side of things. I've got Assistant Principal from Hunt, Jim Kelly, who's representing the middle school, and Assistant Principal Lauren McBride, who's representing the high school. So our subgroup has been meeting with principals and scheduling site visits at all of our schools. In these site visits, we're working with principals and identifying, all of these pieces of what the day is going to look like, having right from students getting off the bus, how they circulate through our buildings. We're looking at our classrooms. We've got a full inventory of all the furniture that we have throughout all of our buildings. Clearly, how we're going to set up our classroom is going to be dictated by the number of students that we're serving on a daily basis. Obviously, there are some huge advantages. Apologize, that's my dog in the background. Huge advantages of scheduling this sort of A-B days where we have at least half the number of students in the building on a daily basis. So we'll be continue working with principals to look at all of the furniture we have throughout the building in order to set up those classrooms to meet those current space requirements that we have to work with, as well as also aligning those desks and tables so that they're all facing forward. And we're also looking at areas on how things such as the lockers are going to be used throughout the day. This is going to require some strategic staggered scheduling and just other aspects of how students circulate around the building throughout the day. We'll be working with each and every principal to come up with those plans.
If you don't mind, Tom, I just want to say that I asked that question because we got feedback from our staff and faculty, and I am on the task force, but I wanted to represent my constituencies and our staff and our faculty to pose that question. And I think Mr. Stiles has one.
Yes, so one of the other questions that really came up in the surveys was around the work for online learning and what that is going to look like. So what is going to be done to address the need for online learning, and also if we have to return to online learning due to outbreaks?
So yeah, oh, go ahead. You ready?
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and take an answer to that. So I think I'll just highlight some of the options that we've started talking about this evening and expand on those. I think one of the biggest pieces that we've done to be ready for online learning is to be sure that we have the tools that students and teachers are going to need. So by ordering in advance and knowing that we've made a plan to have the right technology that's developmentally appropriate, pre-K through 12, we can start the school year with plans to support teachers incorporating that technology into their teaching and student learning right from the very beginning. One of the things that we heard during remote learning was that many teachers and students were not comfortable with the tech tools or did not have the access prior to going into shutdown. So we want to make sure that teachers and students have those technology tools and that we're working with teachers through our tech integrationists, through our librarians, through our other teachers, our instructional coaches. We want to make sure that we're putting together a plan so that teachers and students feel supported to start using the technology and the supporting tools right from the very beginning of the school year. Because we know some families may choose to do remote learning and not send their children to school. And we know that at any point, as we go through the next several months, we might be faced with having to go into remote learning. So we want to make sure that we start the school year with teachers and students feeling that they have the technology tools. But technology is just one piece of the online learning. So we also need to think about the professional development that teachers need. And that professional development is really twofold. One is, again, how to use the technology, how to incorporate the technology into their teaching and learning, but also about effective teaching practices in an online or remote learning experience. So we have already started plans built into our in-service days that will start that work in preparing teachers for online learning. So looking at technology tools, looking at how to incorporate those tools into teaching and learning in a best practices approach. So we're talking about resources, we're talking about professional development. We also know that it's important that we support teachers with the overall curriculum planning. Last week, guidance came out connected to the Common Core standards with blueprints for recommendations on how schools K through 12 should approach teaching the math and ELA Common Core standards for the 2020-2021 school year, given the pandemic crisis that the country faced this spring. So we also need to help teachers think about the content they'll be teaching and how are students impacted by the fact that we went into a remote learning situation in March. We know we all did our best to provide instruction, but we also know there are going to be learning gaps and we need to prepare for that. And we need to support teachers with making those adjustments to curriculum and instruction. So I think it's, yes, we need to be thoughtful about the online learning. We need to be thoughtful about our in-person learning. And when we have a hybrid approach, and really, I think the professional development that we can provide to teachers to support them right from in-service in August, the tools that we will give them and the support around those tools and how we can help them to frame high expectations for teaching and learning are all ways that we can support the learning that will be happening this year.
Thank you, Stephanie. So at this point, we're going to move to the live questions. Victor, you're going to read questions for us, correct?
Yes, I will. A couple caveats here. So there are, I don't even know, hundreds of questions right now. And what we did yesterday, it didn't thrill everybody, but there's a reason we did it and we're going to do it again. I may be sort of combining a series of questions that are essentially on the same exact topic, but it creates a broader question, if you would. So, and I'll give an example of that right now. So some people ask questions about masks for students and where they're going to come from. Some people ask questions about masks for staff and where they're going to come from. Some ask questions about types of masks, and some asked about face shields. So the question really is about what are the types of masks we're going to be using, who's going to be supplying those. Are face shields going to be an option for some staff, and also some questions about students and staff who we need to be able to see their faces, their lips and mouths as part of the teaching.
That's a great question, and I think there are multiple different ways that we can provide both physical distancing, masks, and protective shields. And so we are thinking about all of those options. We do have masks that we are going to be providing. We also know that many families have masks already, and so I think that's where this becomes, us working together. But we are definitely going to we are going to be providing masks. We are currently do have some students using shields in summer school now, and so there are sort of multiple ways to do that. And I think sort of generally in the fear of the masks, I've heard from a couple of doctors who say who have told me they wear masks all day, right? And it is just something that they get used to, and something that if it is protecting our health and safety, that it is worth wearing a mask. And so that's going to be a big piece. Social distancing, health checks, and masks, or physical distancing and masks and health checks are the keys to making this work. I don't know, Becca, do you want to add on to that?
Yeah, I just want to make everyone aware that we are looking into face shields for a limited amount of time. The Vermont Department of Health guidelines around face shields are that they have to be the proper fit. And there's a definition for what that means. A lot of the manufacturers who are making face shields, once we have tried the face shield on, it is not meeting that proper fit definition. And so we are really trying hard to find face shields so that teachers can wear them in a short span of time to do a reading lesson or to do a phonics lesson, so that the students can see your whole mouth and see your whole face as you make different sounds and letter combinations. So we are working hard at that to make that a possibility.
Thank you, Becca. Victor.
Yep. There were a series of questions that I would define as some good equity focused questions, but specifically there were ones that asked about how are we going to, in an AB type schedule and a pod type schedule. So it's both about people coming in and out of the classroom, adults, but also with kids in school every other day. For our English language learners, our students receiving services through an individualized education plan, and then specifically kids who have some pretty intensive special needs.
So that's a really important question. I mean, one of the three areas of focus for us, and the primary, the overarching focus is equity. How do we ensure that we are providing equitable services, which is not equal services necessarily? So there could be opportunities for students to receive services. One of the things that we are considering is students being able to receive services if we went A day, B day, that would mean students would be in school 2 days a week. And there could be a third day for students who need specialized services. And so that could be one way that we do it. In addition, we are going to provide specialized services to all students. We are going to provide the required specialized services, the special education services, the language acquisition services. Those are critically important. This is an equity imperative. This is why we're doing this work. We need to provide every student the best education we possibly can. And so that's something that is right at the heart of our thinking.
Thank you. Another question relating to well, particularly in an elementary type school, but also middle school questions, because obviously I see who these are coming from, around unified arts teacher, specialist, PE, art. How would that work in a pod type situation?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And we're right now, principals are working with their teams to design the structure for what that could look like. And what that could mean is different at elementary and middle and high school. So in some ways it's difficult to talk about as one thing. And we are going to be implementing pods, but there is some flexibility with pods too. So for instance, the Agency of Education guidance says for high schools that they will not be able to maintain that pod structure. They actually don't use pod language, and they don't give a number of students that need to be in that pod. The idea is to have a manageable group that where you can do contact tracing if you need to. And so that's really the key, and that's what principals are planning for. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about the unified arts more specifically, or if there are any examples from the summer.
I'm willing to, I'm open to sharing just some of the things that we've been hearing from teachers and principals as ideas around that. And actually some of these were actually put in the chat as suggestions, which is to maybe some of those happen remotely. Either kids going home, students are home at the end of the day and it happens then, or on their off days, or is it where the students are in the classroom with another adult and the UA teacher is doing it that way, and then the so remoting in a sense while there's other adults in the room with the students. And then the last one is assigning a UA teacher to a pod for a defined period of time, and so there's some co-teaching and integration that could happen.
We're seeing this in summer. We're not seeing it with the UA teachers, but we're seeing service delivery in classrooms. So there's a classroom that I've been into twice in the past couple of days, and there are students who are learning, who are working individually with service providers on computers while the class is also working. So to me, this is going to force us to rethink what teaching and learning looks like, what instruction looks like, what student learning looks like. And so it's an opportunity as well as a challenge. And there are ways that we are doing it now that we can learn from.
There are a series of questions about that align with remote learning, in particular, what that looks like in terms of how we would manage that. So some direct questions like, am I expected to teach in the classroom and also support remote learning?
We're not asking for teachers to directly support remote learning while teaching is going on in the classroom with students in front of you. That is something that some folks are considering across the country. I don't think we're equipped to do that right now. I think there might be teachers, I've heard teachers say that they feel like they can. So we may have some, I bet we will have some of that, but we're not saying that that's the model. So the model would be that students would be on those off days, would be given assignments and would be working on those assignments on the off days, and then would come back. And what we still need to decide is, are there check-in points at some point during the day for those students who are at home to keep them engaged?
Thank you. This is a question, maybe a combination of Christy and Becca, but obviously defer to you, Tom. There's some questions that relate to the summer program. So there's some general ones about trying to understand, like hearing from those staff, like how that's gone, what's gone well, what's maybe been difficult. And then specifically a specific question, we heard that we're getting a great job done processing students at the health checks. We're down to about 1 minute, but still at 1 minute, that adds up really quickly. Any thoughts on how this will be addressed? So sort of two different questions. One about specifically the health checks and what that would look like during the school year, but also any lessons learned, successes or struggles from summer programming.
Ms. Galisi, do you mind taking that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think first of all, before I address that, I want to give a huge shout out to all of the teachers and staff and paraprofessionals who are working in those programs, and the folks who've been working hard to, over the past couple of months, put them together and plan. And it's just been incredible. So we are actively, for people wondering what data we're collecting, we are surveying staff, we are learning best practices. I really encourage everyone to take advantage of these groups of educators. They know these best practices. They are going to be a tremendous resource for people in our district. We find that staggering students in entrances has helped make the health check process go smoother. We are seeing that mask wearing, that there have been some reminders. Many of the students are, it's routine now. The social and physical distancing is something that teachers have had to be strategic about and continues to be something that they are trying new tips and best practices to support that. I think that there are a lot of different things we can take from this group. And we are looking forward to sharing that with everyone when we get there. But we can see that although on a smaller scale, our students want to be back and they're engaged and want to be learning.
Thank you.
Enough.
Do you want me to talk about health screen?
Sure.
So the health screening process does take about 1 to 2 minutes per kid. At summer school, they're seeing it go quickly. As you start, it's going to take longer, but as you get used to the routine, it's going to be quicker. And what we're thinking right now in terms of the health screening process is that at the beginning of the day, you would be outside in pods, manageable numbers, so that we're spending maybe 10 to 12 minutes on screenings. There would be 2 adults, at least 2 adults, one doing a Google form questionnaire for each child, and 1 person who will be taking temperatures for the whole pod. The idea behind this is that if you have a kid who is saying, yes, I have a sore throat, then they have not entered the building, and we will have a nurse's station outside so that you can contact the nurse directly with that child, and then we will contact the parents for them to not go in the building and to go home. So the health screening part, it's really important that we all, unless we all work together, it's going to take a significant amount of time. But if we all work together and we all pitch in to do the heavy lift together, it will take 10 minutes.
Okay, there are a series of questions, some are almost identical, around how we'll deal with sick leave and if somebody has COVID or COVID-like symptoms, and are we going to be looking at that differently? So it's a sort of a Z question. And then also connected to that, just the wondering what's going to happen if we start having just a bunch of staff who need to be out, and then the subpool and what that's going to look like.
Ms. Anderson-Brown, can you take that one?
Yes, I can. So first of all, let me start by, it's kind of in chunks. So if you have an underlying health condition, or you have an immediate family member who has an underlying health condition, or somebody in your household, HR would like to have a conversation with you to try to figure out how to best support you so that you can be as healthy as possible. And there's a whole gamut of things that we can do to try to keep you supported, healthy, and engaged. For sick time, if somebody is test positive for COVID, for example, you may qualify for paid sick leave under the Family First Corona Response Act. So we would take that on a case-by-case basis. We have been supporting our staff since March and their families as they've dealt with different health issues. So Erin Dye is our employee leave specialist, and she helps support our students and our staff to coordinate support, use of leave, use of unpaid leave, engaging in family medical leave. But together, I think as long as we have open dialogue and we work together, we can support these employees and their families. As far as subs, it is on our to-do list. We have been really focusing on staff, and this week we started turning our attention to subs. And we do have our subs that are in-house, and we're looking at staffing levels to make sure that if somebody does need to be out for themselves or for their family, that we have subs in place who can step in and hopefully seamlessly support the students in their continued learning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There's some calendar questions, both around, do we see, well, I'm going to read this one. Will the 2020-21 school calendar be adjusted if BSD moves to an alternating day schedule? Or would students be offered virtual instruction on those days they're not on site? And then also just in general, any changes that we might be having to the calendar?
So there could be changes to the calendar. We are not planning for those changes to be significant, but I said this in the beginning, there's a possibility that we may want to ask for a couple of extra days in pre-service, so that we can prepare for our systems and operations to get up and running. But right now we're planning on an opening on August 26th. I did put a hold on the print of the calendar because the regional superintendents are meeting and we need to align the calendar. So it was a conversation that we had today. We're not making changes to the calendar right now. I don't anticipate any major changes to the calendar overall. The big thing is those 2 days at the beginning of the school year, if we try to gather some additional time for staff to come together to plan for this. So that's, we will be keeping you updated as time goes on. And then I've seen a couple of things come through the chat just about the presentation itself and asking for emails. So we are going to make this presentation, it will be available after the presentation. And so all the emails of the people that we've been referencing and the email addresses are in the presentation. So you'll be able to see that.
There are a bunch of questions about pods, and some of those I feel have been addressed or can be addressed in the FAQs. But this one, how would pods of students work at the high school? I know you touched on this already, Tom, and maybe this is a null question. I can visualize this concept at the elementary middle level, but can't see how this is possible for high school. Is there a different plan at the high school level?
Yeah, so Mr. Green can talk about that, and I just will let people know that the Agency of Education's guidance is different for high schools. And it actually doesn't have, the language is about distinct groups of students who stay together and don't mix much. And so for contact tracing. So that has to be a part of how we think about this as a district. But high schools, in the guidance, it is specifically noted that high schools will not be required to have pods. Mr. Green, do you want to speak a little bit about your process now?
Sure. Agreed. Thank you for clarifying that, because I know that was an important question that kept coming up about the potential for pods. I think one of the things that we're going to be doing at the high school in regard to our precautions include, for example, having the classes be smaller, between 10 to 12 students per class, so that we can ensure distancing. We're also looking at having staggered release times throughout the class change time, so that there are less students in the hall when they travel to their next course. There are fewer classes that they would be going to in a given day. And we're also looking at assigning traffic patterns for students to follow, again, to limit the amount of contact that students are having with each other or staff members in the building.
Right, and I think health checks, masking, physical distancing. So we are working to meet the requirement of the physical distancing. So those are really the big strategies at the high school level. And the only way we feel like we can accomplish that is if not all students are in school every day. So this is why we are leaning heavily toward that A day, B day rotation. And I didn't get to this in the last question, but students will be, we will need to take attendance for students when they're home and away, and we have to have a policy for that. So we have to develop, if we have to develop guidance for how that will look, but students will be expected to be learning and completing work on those off days. And then we have to think about how we're supporting those students.
There are some questions, some relate to staff and some relate to families. As we think about an AB schedule, a hybrid schedule, what would staff do for childcare who have children at home and are working full time? So in other words, you know, my kiddo is on an A schedule and I teach A and B. And then also thinking about that just for families, especially some of our more vulnerable kids, historically marginalized kiddos. Any thoughts around how we will meet the needs of those students on their off days?
Yeah, so we've been thinking a lot about that. We do have resources with the city. So the mayor has reached out to me to let me know. Victor and Victor meets with the mayor's office 2 or 3 times a week, and I drop into those calls as well. And we are developing a strong partnership, and the mayor's really committed to supporting us. And it's possible that there are additional sites so that we could do some form of supportive, childcare and learning that can happen outside of the school for families who need that support.
Will paraeducators be included in the pre-service training?
Ms. Phillips, I don't, what are we answering there?
So Laura Nugent, who is the Director of Special Services, is working on the pre-service schedule for paraeducators. It is part of the plan to have them at least for some portion of the district time and some portion of the building-based time. So a more exact schedule will be communicated in the next few weeks when we're able to know exactly what our final plans look like for those in-service days.
I believe in professional learning for our paraprofessionals. I spoke with the Paraprofessional Advisory Council, and I think that they are such an important resource for us. And so we're going to prioritize, we are going to be providing professional learning.
A question about the length of the school day. So will the school day be the same length?
That is still a decision that we have to make, and some of that depends on the model we land on. Not some of that, all of that depends on the model we land on and how transportation can support that. So it's possible there could be a staggered start and end, and we will be updating with the exact start and end times as soon as we possibly can.
Some more questions related to pods and rooms in general. So any actual guidance, or is it recommendations around the recommended number in a pod, but then also regardless of pod size, with heating and with the heat in many rooms in these first few months of fall, windows that don't open, can we be looking into things like room window air conditioners? Can we look at propping doors open and windows for better airflow? Though due to fire code, we're not supposed to do that. Those types of questions. So it might be a Marty question.
Yeah, Marty, can you take that?
Yeah, I can. So yeah, we are looking at increasing airflows to all of the classrooms. Certainly classrooms that don't have windows, we still have those limitations of not being able to add that outside airflow. Obviously, temperature is a comfort factor, but adding air conditioners do not necessarily increase ventilation. However, it does make occupants more comfortable, and we've certainly been looking at increasing air conditioning in spaces throughout our buildings for our summer schools. And schools that are in other areas that are used for the summer as well. So we'll continue to look at that as well.
Can I jump in on this as well?
Yeah.
This is Noel. So I think one of the things that we're going to do also is be very innovative and flexible with the spaces that we use. Spaces that hadn't typically been used for classrooms will now be used for classrooms so that there is better opportunity for spacing and ventilation. For example, looking at the gym, looking at outside, looking at the courtyard when weather permits. I know that the cafeteria, for example, at BHS won't be used for eating, but I think we can accommodate a small class in the cafeteria, which would allow for the proper spacing to happen, and there's a cooler temperature there. So being flexible with the non-traditional spaces is something that we're also looking towards for next year.
Back to curriculum. To what extent will we be beholden to cover curriculum as in the past? Will teachers have flexibility, this says at the middle level, to cover skills and content that are relevant to today's world, even if it veers from the content that has previously been covered?
So I think there are a couple of pieces to address with that question. One, first is, we know that because of the shutdown that we experienced last spring, that we have to look at curriculum maps across the board and look at what are the priority areas. So that's going to need to happen at all levels, pre-K through 12. We're going to have to really look at what is it that we have in our current grade level curriculum maps, pacing guides, looking at scope and sequence. And we know we're going to have to make some adjustments. So everybody being involved, whether it's through PLCs and other opportunities that we are able to provide during in-service, we're going to have to really look at those documents and figure out what are our priority areas and our priority standards for learning this year. But to the second part of the question about other incorporating in other work that might not have been part of teaching and learning before, I think that goes to what we've learned, or one of the lessons we've learned in this pandemic, which is that we need to think differently about instruction, about curriculum, about teaching and learning. And so I would say that all options are on the table if they're connected to high expectations and giving students those opportunities for deep learning. So I would say that's a conversation that needs to happen at a grade level or a content level PLC, but we are certainly open to thinking about how we can introduce additional learning experiences into those curriculum maps and pacing guides.
Thank you. Are there any restrictions on families being able to choose the remote learning option? Can families with any special needs and children at any grade level choose to learn from home and expect to receive support?
It is possible that we will be providing some remote learning options for families. We also have to run a school district, and we know that some of that's going to be in person primarily. So we have to look at our staffing, but I think it's a good question. It's one that we really have to look at. We have to finalize the model as soon as possible so that we can start looking at exactly how many teachers that we need to be in person, and how much space that frees for us to have virtual instruction. So that is an option for families.
And then the final question, when will we hear more about these plans? Do we need to wait for another meeting, or are there up-to-date planning documents we can view or will be able to view as plans are made?
So we're going to be responding to the emails here. We're going to create an FAQ, and we hope to make a decision on the model very soon. We're sending out a weekly update. And so and we've been doing that the past 2 weeks. And we were doing that in the spring, and so we'll continue to send out that weekly update that will be providing updated information weekly on where we are in this process.
Great. We're at 8:29.
Great. So we'll move back to the last slide here, which is next steps. So first, thank you all so much for being here tonight, for asking us really important questions. It's also important that it's critical that we come up with the final model, which I think we are getting really close to. And then we will be continuing to put out guidance at the district level. And then a lot of that is going to become district school level guidance that will be going out to individual staff members and to families. And so we're going to be working all day and all night to make sure that we get this right and we prepare for a safe and healthy opening to school. We are primarily concerned with making sure that the safety and health of our students and our staff is at the center of our thinking. And we also know that our students, teaching is the most important profession there is, I believe. And so we know the impact we have. So we have to really think about, okay, the impact is real. So we need to be with our students. And so I think for me, that's the equity issue. We have to make sure that we're serving our students during this time and make sure we are staying safe and healthy. And I understand there's a tension there and it's stressful. So I'm going to come out and meet with individual schools, as I said in the beginning, and do more face-to-face so we can have these conversations. Please feel free to reach out here at BSD Reopening at bsdvt.org. We're going to be responding to questions that were not answered in the chat, to questions that are put out here in the email at BSD Reopening. And then we're going to be developing an FAQ all next week so that we can get information out. And I hope that a decision, I predict that a decision on the model will be coming shortly. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you to the panelists for being here a second night to walk through this really important information in July. And I look forward to seeing you all soon.